Now, the Three Martini Lunch with Greg Corombos and Jim Geraghty.
And welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Along with Jim Geraghty of National Review, I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. We're brought to you once again today by Stamps.com. Right now, Three Martini Lunch listeners can get a special offer from Stamps.com that includes a 4-week trial, plus free postage, and a digital scale. See for yourself why over 700,000 small businesses use Stamps.com. Just go to Stamps.com, click at the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in 3 Martini to get your deal. Much more on that later. Jim, let's get to it. They're all crazy today, once again, and 2 of them once again deal with the crisis in Virginia. For now, all 3 statewide elected officials. But now we've got another federal official involved here, the longest-serving member of the Virginia congressional delegation. So good job, everybody. ABC News, Virginia Democratic Congressman Bobby Scott was made aware of allegations of sexual assault against now Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax over a year ago by the alleged victim herself, ABC News has learned. In a statement given to ABC News on Wednesday, Scott wrote, quote, "Allegations of sexual assault need to be taken seriously. I have known Professor Tyson for approximately a decade, and she is a friend. She deserves the opportunity to have her story heard," unquote. In late December 2017 and early January 2018, aides to Scott said he learned that it was Tyson herself who was involved in a Me Too allegation concerning Fairfax. She also informed him that she had already told the Washington Post about an alleged incident involving Fairfax and that she had given the Post Scott's name as a character witness. So, Jim, first of all, it'd be interesting to see if the Post actually contacted Bobby Scott, given that they said that they looked into this quite carefully. But it's hard to know exactly what to say here because apparently Dr. Tyson also didn't want this to go public once the Post didn't do the story. So what do we make of Congressman Scott here?
Yeah, I'll give 2 points in a quasi-defense of the congressman. As you mentioned, Tyson did not want her name out with this at this point, so you don't want to be a Dianne Feinstein. You don't want to leak her name to the press. Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't know it was from Feinstein's office, but basically there was only 2 options. There are only 2 lawmakers on the Capitol Hill who knew about the allegations when they started showing up in the press and reporters started showing up at her door. One was Feinstein. The other one was Eshoo. I'm sorry. Yes. We have no idea who else could have done it. Certainly not a California congressman. Eshoo. I'm sorry. I just did it again. We've decided that's not the right thing to do, to leak the name of an accuser and alleged victim without the victim's permission. Okay. And the other thing which you could point out for Bobby Scott is, look, he's a member of Congress, but he's not a cop. He's not a prosecutor. The incident was in 2004 in Boston. He could fairly ask, what am I exactly supposed to do with this information? On the other hand, I do kind of think there's something of a interesting character question here, because this means Professor Tyson, who he described as a friend for more than a decade, came to him with this information. At some point, it became clear that this was Justin Fairfax, the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. And, this is presumably a big deal to let someone know this person attacked me, this person forced me to do something against my will. And Congressman Scott apparently didn't do anything. So while he could make the argument that his legal options were very limited, and I guess the other thing else is kind of a strange question, like if you've heard that, if you're a member of Congress, members of Congress work with their state governments pretty regularly about figuring out what, spending priorities are and projects and all kinds of stuff like that. I'd be very curious about what the working relationship between Bobby Scott and Justin Fairfax has been like for the past year. If you're Bobby Scott, how do you look at Justin Fairfax the same way? His comment certainly, it's a rather terse public statement, but it certainly implies that he seems to believe Professor Tyson. It certainly is not like, oh, she's my friend, but I think she's making this up. So now the question is, there was another congresswoman who said, I believe Professor Tyson. If you do, then what? What is the appropriate and just consequence of those actions once you've decided you believe this person? We know less than a year ago, a lot of folks said, well, I believe Professor Ford, therefore, Brett Kavanaugh should not be on the Supreme Court. If you believe Professor Tyson, do you believe that Justin Fairfax should remain in office or that he should step down? Now, obviously, this has not been adjudicated in a court of law. As far as we know, there's no physical evidence. There's no other contemporaneous evidence. It is he said versus she said, although at least we can acknowledge they were in the same room at the same time and something happened either a consensual sexual act or not. So again, I don't, Bobby Scott's been in that district for forever and will probably stay for as long as he lives. But I think it's not a good day for Bobby Scott, and it's very understandable Virginians would not look at Bobby Scott quite the way they did 24 hours earlier in light of this news.
Wow. The story just gets odder and odder, and we'll have more on this a little bit later in the podcast. And Jim, I'm not sure who Northam and Fairfax and Attorney General Mark Herring would have to report to if they do decide to resign, but they might want to stock up on stamps because the Virginia statewide elected officials could be sending some letters soon. We'll see. But as you have known, postage rates have gone up again. And thankfully, Stamps.com can ease the pain with big discounts off post office retail rates. With Stamps.com, you save 5 cents off every first-class stamp and up to 40% off priority mail. That kind of savings really adds up, especially for small businesses. Plus, Stamps.com is completely online, which saves you time. No more inconvenient trips to the post office.
Stamps.com automatically calculates and prints the exact amount of postage that you need for every letter or package that you send. You will never overpay or underpay again. Stamps.com brings all the services of the U.S. Postal Service right to your fingertips. You can buy and print official U.S. postage for any letter, any package, and any class of mail using your own computer and printer. Stamps.com makes it easy. They send you a free digital scale which automatically calculates the exact postage you need. Stamps.com will even help you decide the best class of mail based on your needs. And it saves you money. They give you postage discounts that you can't get at the post office, including 5 cents off of every first-class stamp. Anything you can do at the post office, you can now do from your desk for less.
Jim, do you realize what Stamps.com has done here? They're giving you a scale that shows you a lower number than other people's scales. I think a lot of people are going to like that. Right now, our listeners get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale, a magical digital scale that makes your number turn out lower. See for yourself why over 700,000 small businesses use Stamps.com. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in 3 Martini. That's Stamps.com. Enter 3 Martini. All right, let's take a quick break from Virginia politics. We'll get back to it in a second, but let's move over to the 2020 race. This coming weekend, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar is expected to jump into the already very crowded Democratic presidential field. But there's a problem. Here's HuffPost. At least 3 people have withdrawn from consideration to lead Senator Amy Klobuchar's nascent 2020 presidential campaign, and done so in part because of Klobuchar's history of mistreating her staff, HuffPost has learned. Klobuchar, who plans to make an announcement about a potential presidential bid on Sunday in Minneapolis, has spent the past several months positioning herself to run for president. She's beloved in her state as a smart, funny, and personable lawmaker, and has gained national attention for her lines of questioning at high-profile hearings. But some former Klobuchar staffers, all of whom spoke to HuffPost on condition of anonymity, described Klobuchar as habitually demeaning and prone to bursts of cruelty that make it difficult to work in her office for long. It is common to wake up to multiple emails from Klobuchar characterizing one's work as the worst briefing or press release she'd seen in her decades of public service, according to 2 former aides in emails seen by HuffPost. Although some staffers grew inured to her constant put-downs, parenthesis, it's always the worst, one said sarcastically. It was the worst one 2 weeks ago. Others found it grinding and demoralizing. Adding to the humiliation, Klobuchar often CC'd large groups of staffers who weren't working on the topic at hand, giving the emails the effect of a public flogging. Other Klobuchar staffers who would go on record had very good things to say about her. Some who worked for Klobuchar say they value the experience. She has an unrivaled command of details, puts in long, enthusiastic hours, and simply demands that her office meet those same high standards. But one thing is not up for debate, and that is that Klobuchar's office consistently has one of the highest rates of staff turnover in the Senate. From 2001 to 2016, she ranked number 1 in the Senate for staff turnover as measured by Legistorm. So, Jim, that doesn't sound like Minnesota nice, at least for the people that don't have a positive experience with her. And given that she has the highest staff turnover over a 15-year span, it's even more alarming since she wasn't even in office for about half of that time.
Yeah, it is really odd, a couple aspects of this story here, Greg. The first being, folks may recall I did one of those 20 things lists about Amy Klobuchar probably about 2 weeks ago. I'm reminding you of this because it seems nobody read it, because no one appears to care about Amy Klobuchar yet in this process. Look, not the most well-known person, but what she is known for, what's interesting is that, as you said, this Minnesota Nice, having done that, decent amount of research to come up with the 20 things list, Greg, I can tell you, Amy Klobuchar, by and large, is really boring and not full. Like the nice thing is, minimal scandals, a couple cases of putting in some earmarks and putting in some provisions into legislation to help, donor industries and stuff like that. But by and large, this was Republicans generally liked her. Everybody seemed to say she was pretty easy to get along with, which makes this monster boss image pretty surprising. And you might say, okay, it's one or two folks who've had that bad experience, except you do have that really high turnover rate, which is a little bit unusual. Now, I've heard folks say, this is not going to matter. They're going to see this as holding the staff accountable. This is the last thing that voters care about in a Democratic presidential primary. And that's probably true. But let's observe, if you're Amy Klobuchar, you've got a fairly small, narrow window to end up with the nomination. You're by far not the most well-known. You're by far not the most well-connected, best fundraising. I think she's pleasant, but not particularly, overwhelming, great orator or speaker or anything like that. And as I said, Republicans generally, like her and get along with her, at least other Republican senators. But it's worth noting, she's a down-the-line liberal. It's not like there's, some sort of great centrist slot for her in this primary fight. So when niceness is like one of your main attributes, the accounts of you being not just the usual demanding boss, but the, ridiculing, demeaning, calling people out, maybe that does come across pretty negative. There's not enormous amount of room for error here. So we'll see. I mean, the other thing also I wondered about when you first saw various folks have turned down the opportunity to manage her campaign. Some of that might have been, she's a tough boss, a demanding boss. Some of it might have been, well, she's Amy Klobuchar. And I'd rather be, another position on a campaign that could actually win. Rather than manage a campaign that's probably going to be, the Wikipedia entry will be, and Amy Klobuchar also ran for president that year. All in all, this is a long shot bid, and you figure that might be a factor. But those quotes are pretty specific. Also, it's worth noting one other example. There was a fight about a provision in an abortion bill. She blamed the staff in a Senate meeting, and that apparently rubbed a bunch of senators the wrong way, saying that it was kind of unprofessional to say, my staff screwed up. What are you going to do? Good help is so hard to find these days, isn't it, Greg?
Yeah, it is. And you're right.
It sounds like we're getting ready to pitch ZipRecruiter.
That's exactly right. But you're right. I think her personality is her best calling card here, because her argument is going to be, I generally believe what most of these other candidates on my side of the primary believe, but I'm not insane. And because with everybody else lurching to the left, that might actually resonate in some parts of the country. But if folks get the impression that it's more of an act, the public persona, then that's what she really is. It could damage her and whatever chances she actually had.
Two other points, and again, they're not the biggest weaknesses she had, but probably are worth throwing in here. Greg, if I asked you, who is the worst possible person to have as your mentor in your career if you want to run for president as a Democrat? What figure would that be?
Hillary Clinton.
Good guess, but I'd say no. I would argue Walter Mondale, former vice president. And so, that Klobuchar interned for him in the White House, or when he was vice president, knocked on doors for him. We worked at the same law firm. He's been to all of her swearing-ins. They're buddies, and hey, God bless them. But if you go to the Democratic electorate, everything I know about running for president, I learned from Walter Mondale. You can just picture the entire Democratic primary electorate saying, "Thank you, next." And then the sad thing is the argument for Klobuchar is that she is the anti-Trump, not just in terms of positions and things like that, but because she's kind of soft-spoken and pleasant and not very much avoids controversial. Doing the research for the 20 things list there, Greg, I read through so many paragraphs that sounded like she was answering the question, that were just fluff. That were just, like I wouldn't say their word salad suggests that they were incoherent. I would just say that Amy Klobuchar makes Susan Collins look like Alex Jones. Just this, you want to talk about somebody who just doesn't give you anything to use in your headline. Nothing dramatic, nothing exciting, nothing even all that interesting in lengthy, sections of talking on the Senate floor and stuff like that. Amy Klobuchar is your person. She's anti-controversial. And the thinking is that that's either the sort of thing that, either beats Donald Trump by 20 points or loses to Donald Trump by 20 points. Because the exact opposite of what was on offer from the president and most of the Democratic rivals in this coming cycle.
You mentioned Walter Mondale. Here's my favorite Walter Mondale factoid. Obviously, he lost 49 out of 50 states to President Reagan, whose birthday was yesterday, by the way, in the 1984 election. But, of course, you'll also remember after Paul Wellstone died in the plane crash, he lost to Norm Coleman in Minnesota. So I believe Walter Mondale is the only person in American history to lose statewide in all 50 states.
It's tough to do, but kudos. Well done, Mr. Mondale. You will never be forgotten.
All right, let's go to our crazy martini now, our third crazy martini, and we'll get back to Virginia politics and yet another presidential candidate. So we're kind of mixing the two here. Cory Booker has finally spoken out on the situation regarding Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. But it took him a while because on Tuesday, reporters caught up with him. And this was what Cory Booker had to say about the allegations from Dr. Tyson.
I think we should be focusing on what's right now happening with the governor. I know you guys are going to try to focus on a lot of things right now, but right now my focus is on, again, calling for the governor to step down.
As of yesterday, that changed. I assume that's because of the detailed statement that Dr. Tyson gave through her attorneys, the same attorneys for Christine Blasey Ford. Manu Raju at CNN with these tweets. Booker said the allegation against Fairfax is, quote, deeply, deeply disturbing, and the accuser should be commended for coming forward. Quote, I have not read the allegations, but it takes tremendous courage for someone to come forward in the way that she did. He said it's a deeply disturbing allegation that should be thoroughly investigated. So, Jim, what do you make of, I guess, A, the fact that he is finally talking about it now, B, the fact that he and other Democrats are acting like for days that they didn't even know who these people are in Virginia. And I know you just wrote a big piece on Cory Booker, 20 things we might not have known. So take it away.
Yeah, well, first go click and read that. I'll wait. Okay, I'm hoping you're back now. So first thing that comes out of this, so what we've seen with the revelations about Justin Fairfax, and now the Attorney General Herring having his own blackface incident, is how, let's face it, cheap were the calls for Northam's resignation over the weekend were. Because it's very easy to say, look, our Democratic governor should step down so that our young, charismatic lieutenant governor can step in and run for re-election, which is something that happens very rarely in Virginia because we limit our governors to one term. As long as our party gets to keep it, this guy should step down. But now that you've got the allegations against Fairfax, and I suppose we should give Booker some credit for acknowledging those. And now we've got the issue of Herring having his own situation of blackface. And, oh, by the way, Herring did call for Northam to resign over this. So Herring has two really awkward positions right now. One is that clearly if you wear blackface in medical school, that is unacceptable and you must step down. But if you do it as an undergrad, it's not that bad. Look, doing it at 19, look, we've all done stupid. But at 25, you really shouldn't be doing that anymore. That's unacceptable. And the second thing, I think Herring made things worse for himself yesterday when he announced he was stepping down as co-chair of the Democratic Attorney General's Association. Greg, why would this revelation require him to step down from a partisan organization but not step down as the state's chief law enforcement officer?
Good question.
I don't look. It's his way of saying, look, it's bad, but it's not that bad. And I just don't think that's it. Look, Democratic presidential contenders, and almost all of them, Friday night were saying Northam's got to go. Now the situation has gotten much more complicated and much more difficult for them. And a little while back, I just compared it on Twitter to the Koyabashi Maru from Star Trek, the no-win situation. Because let's walk through every scenario, Greg, and I'll try to do this as quickly as I can. It's pretty clear. None of these guys are resigning, right? So the only option right now is, do you impeach them? If you impeach Northam, but leave the other two in place, people are going to naturally ask, well, wait a second, you're getting rid of Northam for blackface, but not Herring? When one guy's is not so bad and the other guy's is, So let's say you get rid of both of them. Well, okay, now you've taken out two of the three top lawmakers in the state, but you left Justin Fairfax in place facing this fairly serious sexual assault allegation. And as terrible as blackface is, it's tasteless, it's appalling, but it's not a crime. Sexual assault is. So somehow you've managed to decide that, one level of offense against good taste and racial sensitivity is worthy of resignation, but not the accusation coming from Professor Tyson. But let's say you decide, okay, well, no, let's do the other one. Let's take out Justin Fairfax. So you left the two guys with blackface on, but you took out the one statewide African-American elected official in the government of Virginia right now. That one would not fly. So if you think these are all pretty bad, and if you think these are all worthy of resignation, if you think they're all worthy of being removed from office, then you end up with Governor Cox, the Republican, and there's no way they're going to do that. Oh, by the way, one other thing about if Herring were to step down or were to have a vacancy or something like that, his replacement would not be appointed by the governor if the state assembly was in session. The state assembly would vote to replace the state attorney general. Now, if the state assembly is not in session, then the governor gets to appoint somebody who holds the job until the state assembly replaces him. Oh, by the way, Republicans have a very narrow majority in the state assembly. For those wondering, hey, what are you talking about, Democrats? Don't Republicans have majorities? Well, you need a 3/4 majority to remove one of these officials. Right now, Republicans have a very narrow majority, so it would have to be a bipartisan majority reaching 3/4 of the chamber to remove any of these guys. Good luck, Democrats. They're probably going to decide the least harmful option is to keep everybody in place.
Yes, I think once Herring came out with his confession on Wednesday, that I think that sealed it for Ralph Northam. He's not going anywhere. But if there were to be resignations en masse, the other thing that I've heard is that Herring and Fairfax would go. Northam would then appoint a different lieutenant governor and then resign so that new lieutenant governor would take over, who I'm sure wouldn't be tainted by the Northam appointment at all.
Just what you want to do in an election year, right? I mean, to do that, Greg, they'd have to find a Virginia Democrat who's neither worn blackface or has sexual assault allegation against him. Some of them must be in that category.
Yeah.
We just haven't found any yet.
They just haven't won any elections lately.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Good luck, Virginia Democrats. Wait, how often do we get to... Two things I almost never get to say, Greg. First, boy, Republicans haven't screwed this up yet. And the second thing I almost never get to say, for anyone asking, yeah, I live in Virginia, but I'm from New Jersey.
That's good. Jim, we'll see what happens in the next 24 hours. We'll never know. See you then.
See you then.
Jim Geraghty of National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. And hey, go save some money, especially for that small business of yours. Go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in 3 Martini. Stamps.com, enter 3 Martini. And tune in Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.